It has been essentially a war over the use of words here in Moscow today. At a Russian military briefing, a general described the truth movements as not a withdrawal, not pulling out, but pulling back. He was very specific about this. What does that mean? Well, we put that question to another Russian general. Let's hear what his answer to that question was.
Pulling out, it means that we do not withdraw from the whole area. We are pulling away or pulling out from the territory of Georgia back to the territory of South Ossetia. And the main force that was reinforced, our peacekeepers there, will be back in Russia. That's the meaning of those words.
Still less than clear, isn't it? But what they're saying is that Russian forces are beginning to move out of Georgia proper, and they are moving into South Ossetia, that breakaway region that they went to war over around a week ago. Now, they say from there, the bulk of the force that was sent in to occupy parts of Georgia, well, that will cross that Russian border back into North Ossetia. Now, remember, before this conflict began, there was a peacekeeping force within South Ossetia, and a large proportion of that peacekeeping force was made up by Russian soldiers. The Russians now say they will still maintain the bulk of responsibility for that peacekeeping operation for the moment. There used to be Georgians in there as well as South Ossetians. It's unclear to what extent the South Ossetians can contribute to that peacekeeping operation. The final makeup of that force will be determined through international negotiations, and there has been some suggestion that a European contingent could be part of it. So for the moment, certainly Russian forces are going to be remaining in Georgia. Even once they pull back from Georgia into South Ossetia, there will be a peacekeeping force. The question is, and the Russians aren't answering this, how large will that peacekeeping force be once the bulk of their forces return to Russia, Hala?
Right, but this was my question. Essentially, if the Russians are keeping more troops inside of South Ossetia than were there before, isn't that in essence, a violation of the ceasefire agreement that they signed?
The ceasefire agreement is not specific on this, essentially. Certainly what it calls for is for all forces to return to the positions they held before this conflict began. Now, if the Georgians are no longer to be part of this peacekeeping operation, we don't know what the South Ossetians can contribute. Certainly the Russians will feel, given recent events, that the threat, if you like, to South Ossetia is greater than it was. They're going to keep a force there. They're not talking numbers yet, but they have said that this is essentially a political decision that will be made by Russia's leaders through negotiations, mostly through Europe itself. Having said that, the ceasefire agreement, as Condoleezza Rice, the US Secretary of State, said, it was not a long-term solution to the question of South Ossetia and the other breakaway region, Abkhazia. Its priority was simply to get Russian troops out of Georgia proper. If that's the priority, then maybe if the Russians continue to do what they're doing, that will happen. But then the next question is, how will the peace be kept within South Ossetia?
Sure, especially if you have Russian peacekeepers in a situation where Russia is one of the parties.